Good morning students. So yesterday we have completed unit 1. Unit 1 time complete करले the portrait of lady. Today I will discuss the question answers of unit 1. ହେଲା देखो first question unit 1 ର first question see the page number 68. Why was it hard for the author to believe that his grandmother was once young and pretty? कहीं तांको पई विश्वास करिबा जोटा सहजरे से विश्वास करि पारु नथिले जे तांको ग्रैंडमदर दिने जो वाज वंस यंग एंड प्रिटी से युवती थिले आउ सुंदर थिले बोली फर्स्ट हम क्वेश्चन टा लिखिबा क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 why was it hard Why was it hard for the author to believe that his grandmother was once young and pretty? कहीं किसे विश्वास करि पारु नथिले तो पैसेज को जाओ फर्स्ट एट आगो क्वेश्चन रु आगो आंसर टा को आनिबा कोन ना it was hard for the author it was hard for the author to believe that his grandmother was once young and pretty because कहीं किसे विश्वास करि पारु नथिले ना जोटा कि से थिला जे कोन से ताको जेबेठु देखि चंती for 20 years she had been old and wrinkled से सेते दिन से देख जेबे ठारू से ताको जानि छंती सेबेठु से देखंती जे से बुढ़ी आउ कुंचित मुखमंडल सेटा को लिखिबा देखो पैसेज को जाओ जोटा अछि फर्स्ट सेकंड लाइन टा she had been because she had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that he had known her. देखो आंसर टा it was hard for the author to believe that his grandmother was once young and pretty because she had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that he had known her. एटी जदी एटी known बदलले तुमे he had seen her भी लिखि परिबो जेबेटु से तांको देखि चंती बा जेबेटु से तांको जानि चंती क्लियर देन कम टू द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन how did the grandmother appear in his grandfather appear in his portrait question number 2 how did the grandfather appear in his portrait. केमती देखा ना सी जोटा ही और जाओ पैसेज को जे ही और ए बिग टर्बन गोटे बड़ पगड़ी पिंधले लूज फिटिंग क्लॉथ्स देन ताकर जो व्हाइट बियर्ड कवर द बेस्ट पार्ट ऑफ हिज चेस्ट से सब देखा आंसर एठो नबा द ग्रैंडफादर grandfather appear अच्छे did then appeared in his portrait. As कौन he wore a big turban. He wore a big turban. And also he wore a loose fitting clothes and a big turban on his head, and he wore loose fitting clothes. एटा देख एति पर्यंत तुम बुक रे थिला एटा तुम ऐड करलो हैला ही और लूज फिटिंग क्लॉथ्स आउ कोन थिला ना हिज लॉन्ग व्हाइट बियर्ड कवर द बेस्ट पार्ट ऑफ हिज चेस्ट सेटा उच लिखा जबा हिज लॉन्ग देखो the grandfather appeared in his portrait as he wore a big turban on his head and he wore loose fitting clothes and his long white beard covered the best part of her chest. ता सहित आउ कोन ना ही लुक्ड लाइक 100 years old सेटा लिखबा एटा लिख साला पर एटी फुल स्टॉप देके एंड देके भी लिख पारे फुल स्टॉप देके ही देखो यार आंसर टा जो यार जो गोटे लाइन आंसर टा ऊपर लिख दोजी he also पूराटा लिखा जीवनी एटी काइंडा तार नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन देखो गोटे अछि व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ ए पर्सन डिड ही लुक इन हिज पोर्ट्रेट ताको जो ही हैड वाइफ और चिल्ड्रन सेटा लिखा जीवनी खाली लिखा जीवो कोन एंड ही लुक्ड एट लीस्ट 100 years old सेति पर्यंत ना एंड he also looked at least 100 years old. Clear? ला तो एठू जोटा रखिलो चेस्ट ता पाखरु and he also looked at least 100 years old. Then come to the next question, question number 3. What sort of a person did he look in his portrait? Come to the question number 3. ला What sort of a person Did he look in his portrait? तांकर से जो पोर्ट्रेट रे से केमिति देखा जाउथले हैला देखो व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ ए पर्सन डिड ही लुक इन हिज पोर्ट्रेट तो सेटा जोटा लेखा जिवो देखो जोटा हम छाड़ले 100 इयर्स ओल्ड सेठी एठी लेखा जिवो ही looked in his portrait answer he did not look the sort of a person लिखा है जोटा he did not look the sort of person who would have तांकर केवल जो गोटे वाइफ और चिल्ड्रेन थिला बोली नुह से देखा होतले केमती ना तांकर जो ग्रांड चिल्ड्रेन ही अछंती सेटा पर्सन हु वुड हैव ए वाइफ और चिल्ड्रेन wife or children he looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. He would only have lots and lots of grandchildren. देखो he did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. Clear? देखो let's see the next question. How does the author portray his grandmother? Question number 4. How does the author portray his grandmother? सी केमिति तांकर ग्रैंडमदर को पोर्ट्रेट ही करिसेंती तो हम पैसेज रे जेमती दिया हिची जैसे टेरिबली हुई सी लुक लाइक ए टेरिबली ओल्ड वुमेन देन जो सी हैड ऑलवेज बीन शॉर्ट फैट से सब देखो आंसर द ऑथर portrays नने एटा टिके लेंथी हबो एठा न स्टार्ट करके डायरेक्ट सी पाखरु स्टार्ट कर दबा हला एटा टिके लेंथी हबो देखो हिज ग्रैंडमदर was a terribly old woman आउ कौन थिला ना she had been always she जो देची she had always been सेटा को हमें चेंज कर दी कि she was है she was short, fat and slightly bent. How kono na her face was a crisscross of wrinkles. Her face was crisscross wrinkles. आउ कौन ना सी कुड नॉट हैव ग्रोन ओल्डर जोटा एटा छाड़ देला जे वी वर सर्टेन दैट सी हैड ऑलवेज बीन एज वी हैड नोन हर एटा किसी दरकार नहीं देन सी कुड नॉट हैव grown older. She could not have grown older and had stayed and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. At the same age for 20 years. तक जमती constant सेती की एज थिला हला then she was 20 years out of gonna and she was beautiful. तापर आउ गोटे जोटा लाइन अच्छे एठू जे सी hobbled about the house in spotlight white with one hand resting on her waist to balance a stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. हला एटा को भी लिखिबा एटा ऊपर लिख दोछि लिभे की से जो क्वेश्चन नंबर 4 रो आउ जो हाफटा सी हबल्ड अबाउट माने कौन कहली ना छोटे छोटे चलवा जो अनबैलेंस्ड स्टेप जोटा सी हबल्ड अबाउट द हाउस सी हबल्ड अबाउट the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist अब कौन to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of a rosary. Beads of a rosary कौन कहती ना रुद्राक्ष मानी से जपुतले telling the beads of her rosary and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. देखो या पूर्व जोटा लिखाई था she was beautiful, then she hobbled about the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Clear? Then next question, question number 5. Why does he say the thought was almost revolting? Question number 5. How does he, why does he say the thought was almost revolting? से कहीं की कही थिले जे से जो द थॉट वाज ऑलमोस्ट रिवोल्टिंग, तो एठो आंसर आनिबा he says the thought was almost revolting because कहीं की because the thought because कोटा जोड़ा सी once young and pretty है, because the thought that the grandmother was once, एटा अच्छी पैराग्राफ रे तुम पैसेज को जाओ जे एठी जो से कही थिले जे जोटा तांकर once young and pretty थिले बोली से विश्वास करि पारु नथिले, was once young and pretty young and pretty was revolting for the author. he had accepted the person, he had accepted the person as his loving grandmother. देखो, he says the thought was almost revolting because the thought that the grandmother was, कौन से thought टा तांको पाई revolting थिला ना से young और pretty थिले बोली सेटा को से he couldn't believe that सेटा होची the thought that the grandmother was once young and pretty was revolting for the author. He had accepted the person as his loving grandmother. Then last question, question number 6. Question number 6. The grandmother had a divine beauty. The grandmother had a divine beauty how does the author bring this out? जो तांकर डिवाइन ब्यूटी माने कौन जे द ग्रैंडमदर हैड ए डिवाइन ब्यूटी माने तांकर दैविक सुंदरता जे से डिवाइन ब्यूटी तांकर सुंदरताटाकू से एठी केमिति आनी छथि डिवाइन ब्यूटी जोटा कि हमर कंपेयर हितला कोन विंटर लैंडस्केप सहित तांकर ब्यूटीटाकू तो सेटा देखो जाओ जे आम पैसेज को जाओ एठु आगो आनो जे द ऑथर ब्रिंग्स दिस आउट आंसर. First, the grandmother had a divine beauty. The grandmother had a divine beauty. Then the author brings this out as कौन जाओ पैसेज को as she was like the winter landscape. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains and she was expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Breathing peace and contentment. Hello, देखो, the grandmother had a divine beauty. The author brings this out as she was like the winter landscape in the mountains, and she was expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. तो यहाँ जोटा अच्छी लैंडस्केप इन द माउंटेन्स एंड एक्सपेंस ऑफ प्योर व्हाइट सेरेनिटी, ब्रेदिंग पीस एंड कंटेनमेंट, यार मानटा केमती कहती ना तांकर उपस्थितिटा गोटे शांति आ तृप्ति आणुथिला। तो सहीटा हूँ से डिवाइन ब्यूटी को केमती आनिछंती ना तांको कंपेयर करछंती विंटर लैंडस्केप सहित, जेमती कि शीतरे जो पर्वतर पादटा स्निग्ध थाए सेमिति तांको देखिले सेमती पीस आ कंटेनमेंट आउथाए हैला। तो यहाँ आमर आज क्वेश्चन आंसर सरीगला। इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास I will continue with unit 2. Okay, thank you.